Sorry about that.
That's okay. No, no big deal. It's only 10:03.
Technical difficulties. Wow, great crowd today.
Yeah.
32 folks.
Okay.
So Michael Williams, Turning Point Workforce Development Board, if you would like to take it away, sir.
Okay.
Right.
Well, good morning and welcome to all. We're so excited to see everyone this morning. Like you said, it's a nice looking crowd here. My name is Michael Williams. I'm staff to the Turning Point Workforce Development Board as director. Upper Coastal Plain Council of Governments actually serves 5 counties: Edgecombe, Nash, Halifax, Northampton, and Wilson counties. Robert Hyatt is our executive director. And as I stated earlier, we are truly excited to be a part of this panel discussion today on the challenges of child care. We have 2 great leaders, Mr. Ron Townley, who is now the Upper Coastal Plain Council of Governments new project manager, which was our former planning director, which Ben is doing an excellent job now as the new planning director. And also Ms. Henrietta Zalkine, Executive Director of Down East Partnership for Children. And I don't think there's anybody in North Carolina that does not know Henrietta. She has truly been a leader and a visionary in child care over the years. And I even had some personal experience. Our kids actually went to the child care together. So she definitely speaks and lives what she talks about. But today, again, we are excited. This is kind of coming to us today due to our SEDS. Many of you may be familiar with the comprehensive economic development strategies that the Council of Government provides. This is an opportunity for us to really bring together stakeholders, partners, and really work together regionally on things and topics. So today, this is going to help us in our roundtable discussion or the panel discussion on the topic of early childhood education and the challenges that we face. Just a few housekeeping notes. We will be monitoring the chat throughout the panel for questions. There will be a Q&A before the breakout room, so we will be having breakout sessions. And during the breakout rooms, we will be moderated, and there will last about 15 minutes, after which we will come back for a brief discussion and follow-up. So again, we are excited to have this session and move forward. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Henrietta Zalkine to take it forward. I think you're on mute, Henrietta.
There you go. Well, there you go. Well, thank you and welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. I know this is a busy day prior to the storm, but I think all of us that are here today have been working on creating an early ed system that can really invest in not only the workforce today, but the workforce of the future. And many of us have been working together, as Michael said, for many years. And we are lucky today to have 5 great panelists. The 5 of the smartest people I know who have been doing great work to move the system forward, cradle to career for many, many years. Alexandra Sirota, who is here with us, is the director of the North Carolina Budget and Tax Center and has been working on economic development issues literally, certainly as long as I've been here. You know, she went to Haverford College, she went to the University of Chicago and got a master's in public policy and has really been working not just on childcare and early ed, but on all of the different things that move people forward out of poverty into economic independence and help communities thrive across the state of North Carolina. Dr. Christy Snuggs, I think a lot of you know, she is the former vice president of Edgecombe Community College. She is the former director of the Head Start program that serves Nash, Edgecombe, Wilson counties. She is currently the deputy director of the Division of Child Development and Early Education, and is in almost a month going to become the president of the Childcare Services Association that has both statewide responsibilities and national responsibilities for developing the childcare workforce and supporting high quality early ed across our state. Christy's got a doctorate in educational leadership and has been providing that leadership for many, many years. Lisa Finaldi is the community education leader for the North Carolina Early Education Foundation. She has been overseeing, but not only the statewide campaign for grade level reading, which Nash and Edgecombe counties are a site for, and many of you have participated in that work to make sure that not only the children are ready for schools, but the schools are ready for all of the kids who come, and have successfully launched them as healthy lifelong learners by the end of the 3rd grade. She has been working tirelessly on growing a strong economy and helping employers build the family-friendly workplaces that they need to improve productivity, recruitment, and retention of the employees they need to move our community forward. Linda Knight is the owner and the director of Think and Grow Childcare. Many people in Tarboro, North Carolina. I think there are 3 sites right now. She is a scholarship provider for infants and toddlers. She's an NC pre-K provider. She is a member of the DEPC board, and I think she holds the record for serving terms, going off, coming back on, and has been a steadfast advocate, not only for high quality early ed, but for a workforce that is well-trained, well-compensated. She is a former member of the North Carolina Childcare Commission, and not only a leader in our community, but a thought leader in the state around what needs to happen to have a strong early ed system that supports a strong workforce. And last but not least, probably our newest friend, but not new to the this conversation, is Amanda Dansk. She is now the senior researcher on a project that we are working on at the American Institute for Research here in North Carolina. They're based here, but they do work nationally. Before that, Amanda worked in accountability at DPI in terms of educational accountability and what's working and how does that move us all forward. Her doctorate is in education evaluation and accountability, and she is currently working on a project that ARPA money is funding through the state to look at an alternate market rate and subsidy system, and that may better support both parents, working parents, and the people who employ them. So smart people who are here to help us guide our discussion and look at what we can do as a community to continue to move forward from now until every child is launched as a healthy lifelong learner. So I will turn that over to Ron Townley, who is going to do a great job, I'm sure, facilitating our panel.
Thank you, Henrietta, and good morning, everyone. This looks like a great group of people here. I've been scanning through the names. Some of you I know, many of you I have never met. For our purposes, do feel free to use the chat in a couple of ways. First of all, it'd be great if folks just put in your name, who you're with, and if you wanted to share contact information with the group, that helps us to create a record. I'm sure Henrietta knows everybody, but some of you may wish to get to know each other or understand who is on this call with us today. I've even seen some federal official names and things like that on there. So it's great to have such a diverse representation. I am going to jump right in. We're going to spend about the first hour of this meeting just getting into discussions with the panelists. I'm going to give them pretty broad questions. They're going to tackle it from their vantage point, and we'll just see how it goes. This first one is basically asking that from your perspective, what impact did COVID and the current economy have on working parents' ability to access affordable quality childcare? So that's the general question there. And I wanted to start with Alexandra to please share your perspective from that federal and state level. How has this appeared on your radar?
Thanks, Ron. It's great to be with you all, and so excited that you're launching this conversation and really forging a connection between the issues in the early childhood system and their critical role in building economic development in our regions. There's nothing more clear to me after the period of the pandemic that early childhood education is both a near-term system that we have to have in place if we want thriving economies, and a system that we need to really make as robust as possible to be sure that going forward our communities are resilient in the face of things like pandemics or other shocks to our economy. So I think the way it showed up, as I've seen it in the research, is very clear. Surveys have been monitoring people's experience of the pandemic. And over the course of the full pandemic, we've seen the numbers now remain consistently high, that 1 in 5 people in households with young children said in the past 4 weeks, children in their household were unable to go to childcare because it was unaffordable, unavailable, or closed. We know that a lot of families had to use paid leave because childcare centers had to be closed due to healthcare issues. We also know that many people had to reduce hours or leave a job because they couldn't access childcare. So what I would say is these numbers tell us that the situation, it requires an urgent response. But I want to be really clear that COVID-19 is just revealing what was already happening in communities across the state. The reality is that our early childhood education system was not fully supported in the way that it needed to be in order to make sure that every child had access to quality care and every working person felt that they could afford and connect with a provider and get to work in doing so. So I think we're seeing now how critical this system is. And I just say, and I know we're going to talk about this down the line, but just as a teaser on this point, I think what we've also seen in the COVID-19 moment is that we know what works, and that we can, if we commit to it, do what works to make sure that this system is a strong foundation for our regional economies. And what works is making sure that providers are adequately compensated for the care that they provide. And that means a public commitment, not relying solely on families and their ability to afford care. We also know that we need to be very attentive to the fact that there are real gaps right now in communities, and that to bring more providers into delivering care, that we need to support entrepreneurs and workers in the early childhood education field to feel like this is a career, this is a pathway, this is a sustainable way to be part of their local community. And those are just 2 ways I think right now COVID-19 is showing this is a critical issue, and it's impacting working families, children, providers, businesses in a whole host of ways.
Thank you, Alexandra. I think, yeah, this first question around COVID-19, I know a lot of people out there feel like it's over, it's past, it's whatever, but now it's lessons learned, right? Every system that may have had weaknesses or cracks in its foundation crumbled, and childcare is one of them. So that's the relevance here. I want to jump over to Linda Knight. Again, she's with the Think and Grow Childcare Center. So really right down there on the front lines. Linda, tell us what you are seeing as a person on the front lines and how it has shown up on that on the ground level for you and your community. Let's see. I'm looking for Linda on my screen. Make sure you're.
Hey, Linda, if you hear us, it looks like you're muted.
Yep, unmute, Linda.
There you go.
I'm good. Okay. Good morning. I am Linda Knight and Director of Think and Grow Childcare Center right here in Tarboro, North Carolina. And we live in Edgecombe County. And as you know, Edgecombe County is a Tier 1 county. Unfortunately, we're number 3 in the state because of our unemployment rate, income, population, and property taxes. But at the same time, on the front line, what we're seeing, quality childcare is still at a place where it's much needed. Parents cannot afford it. And basically it's due because of the age that the parents needs. Now, right now, it seems like it's been a boom because of COVID. You know, the babies are coming. Sometimes you might have a call in 1 week for 5 or 10 babies. You don't have that space. And so at the same time, after school care is much needed as well. A lot of the centers have opted not to go to the schools to pick up children. And basically it's because we cannot find the help. That is one challenge that we're really having is finding quality staff that will stay and help us out on those that are qualified. Children are going to schools, Edgecombe Community College, Nash, taking up Edgecombe, taking up childcare, but they do not go in the field. For some reason, they're not coming to childcare center. At the same time, subsidy vouchers are very, very limited. And just because our parents are receiving rate increase, $2 or $3 more an hour, doesn't mean that they can afford $249 or $250 a week for childcare. It is basically a struggle for them. And so only thing that we can do is we have to charge the same thing that we receive from subsidy. Subsidy rate is equal the same thing we charge private parents. Now, if you do have a voucher, 2.5 years, they didn't have to pay anything. Well, that was good for the ones that had vouchers. But what about the ones that didn't have it? They had to pay, or either they opt out, not sending their children to childcare. Where did those children go? Possibly to grandmother, uncle, aunt, or either in some unsafe neighborhood. So we have to really look at that as to see what can be done about it. But basically what we're saying that the affordability is not there for the parents, especially if you are in a county that the unemployment rate like Edgecombe County is 8%. We are really at our wit's end. And we want to know what can be done to help our parents as far as receiving quality childcare. We've opened up new centers. At the same time, we're trying to find good help, good staff to come. And some of them just freezes up when they get in the classroom because they did not encounter what was going on. But at the same time, we're thankful for what we're trying to do here in Edgecombe and Nash County. Down this partnership, they're great. We have sessions as to what can be done in our community as far as directors coming together. And we're having the same challenges. I've talked with directors and we're having the same challenges as far as finding staff that's in the, that's in early childhood to be able to help us out.
All right. Thank you for that, Linda. And, I am definitely no expert in this area and both of my kids are grown, but, the catch-22 I hear and see that you all know is you have to pay your employees a good quality, livable, attractive wage and benefits to bring them into the system and keep them in the system. And you have to be affordable for parents, especially families in need. And those two things are diametrically opposed to each other. Therefore, there have to be tools in the toolbox, whether through policy or programs, that can make that or clear that way forward. I'm going to jump over to Christy right now for your perspective from the Division of Child Care Development and Early Education. Christy, again, the question from your perspective, what impact did COVID have? And what has the current economy had for working parents' ability to access and afford this childcare that's needed?
Thank you, Ron. Good morning, everyone. I am so thrilled to be back with you guys down in Edgecombe and Nash. I spent a almost 15 years of my career working in Eastern North Carolina, and I'm so glad to have this moment to share. I will just say that, the last 3 years have probably been the hardest years of my career. It has been very difficult to try to figure out from a state perspective, how do we keep childcare up and running? And how do we make sure that it's affordable and accessible for parents? The bottom line is this: businesses need employees for our state's economic recovery. They need employees, but many of the parents can't work because they cannot find affordable early care and learning. Just to give you some idea, North Carolina has a tremendous early care and learning system. It's providers like Linda Knight, who you just heard from, that kept their doors open during the pandemic. We're on the front lines serving families that were essential workers that really, really made a difference. But even as great as our network of providers are, they serve too few children. And the early learning care costs exceed what families can pay. This was a problem prior to the pandemic, but once the pandemic hit, those costs for childcare providers increased. And you just heard Linda explain that right now, there are very limited programs that provide funding to help the early care and learning network. So it is on the backs of parents and the providers themselves who invest so much money into their facilities and into their workers. It is them that have to pay the cost. Just to give you an idea, North Carolina families with 2 young children spend on average about 17% of their income on early care and learning, while a single parent with 1 infant, because infant and toddler care costs more,
Right.
A single parent with 1 infant pays almost 38% of their total income on childcare for a month. People can't live with those type of spending, but they have to work in order to pay their bills. Some years, North Carolina has had as many as 30,000 families on a waiting list to get childcare subsidies that Linda spoke about. Right now, those lists are less, but we have so many families that can't be served because there's just not enough vouchers, as she mentioned, but there's not enough money to support all the families that need it. We have a tremendous North Carolina NC pre-K program, but due to the lack of public funding, nearly 33,000 eligible children in North Carolina go unserved each year. All of these things were impacted even more by the pandemic. Just to give you a little perspective, prior to the pandemic, we had about 5,700 childcare facilities across the state. That includes centers as well as family childcare homes. We were serving about 265,000 children, and we were employing over 41,000 employees across the state. At the height of the pandemic, when it hit, that 265,000 children, we dropped to serving 60,000 because 47% of our facilities, only 47% of our centers remained open. It was a traumatic impact. Our employees dropped in half. We had less than 20,000 childcare workers that were available during the pandemic, and many of them have not returned.
Sure.
What many people don't understand is in early childhood, in our early care and learning network, we have an aging workforce. We have a workforce that is made up of a majority of minority women. And for, as many of you know, they are getting pay that is so low, an average of $12 an hour. And they are serving our children during their most formative years. They have got education. They're doing a phenomenal job, but we're not investing. And again, the reason they get paid so poorly is because you can't charge families enough to raise their salaries to where they need to be. Impact of COVID has been tremendous on this industry. Now, luckily, the division was able to get federal funding. We had a historic investment of over $1.3 billion that we have turned around and put into the workforce. We have tried our best to sustain our early care and learning networks. And during this time, we've been able to help families and help providers. We've put over $800 million in stabilization grants into our workforce, which has allowed our providers to keep their doors open, to pay some of their bad debt off, to raise the salaries of their teachers and be able to keep them there and helping providers. But a lot of our workforce decided it is hard work to work with children. And during the pandemic, when they're at home, there's been all kinds of social and emotional issues. There's been challenging behaviors that have emerged. And a lot of people have said, I can do other things and get paid a lot more and get benefits. Only about a quarter of our workforce have benefits, guys. It is difficult. And this pandemic has exacerbated those issues. But we were able to put this investment, and we have seen tremendous work from our early learning and care system. But we are at a point that we're getting ready to hit a cliff. Those funds are being depleted. Come January of 2023, those $805 million of stabilization grants that we've invested, all of that money has been exhausted. And we've had to add other dollars to help support that. So we have got to find a way to continue to get additional public support to support this industry. And Ron, I'm going to stop there. There's so many more things I could say, but I want to make sure that everyone has time. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, when the facts start getting laid on the table, it's just always amazing to me. The analogy that comes to mind is, placing triage bandages on gushing wounds. And and here we are heading for, as you say, the next cliff, right? And we fall off of that, new gushing wounds, new triage bandages. There's got to be a better way, which we'll break into in just a little bit. Let's jump over to Amanda. I want to get your thoughts on the matter. Go ahead, and again, the American Institute of Research, you might have a couple of interesting bits to add.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ron, and thank you all for allowing me to be here with this exciting opportunity. It's so great when everyone gets together to, give some careful thought to how we can make things better. But I really appreciate both Christy and Alexandra kind of laying out the facts for us, because we all hear it or we're living it, but hearing those facts really helps hit it home just how rough things have been over the past few years. And like everyone has said, how rough things were even before that this COVID pandemic was really just a contrast die added to the mix to help us see things a little bit more clearly. And so what I wanted to share is the work that the American Institutes for Research has partnered with DCDEE to conduct a study to help develop some alternative models to calculate the subsidy rate for childcare across the state. And so that's a mouthful, so let's break it down. So we are working with DCDEE to first understand what the issue is. And you all have pointed to it. We see it in the data. But a key piece of this work is we plan to engage stakeholders from across the state in understanding how the current subsidy rate impacts them, and also trying to understand what they would view as a more effective model. And so the stakeholder engagement is really important. And as you all know, there are so many groups and individuals across the state who work tirelessly to not only support children, but build a better ship, build a ship that can help move us forward and improve things for all families. And so we're very excited to have those opportunities to talk with people across the state. Another piece that we're doing as part of this study is analyzing the other states and US territories to understand what they're doing. So, North Carolina is not unique in experiencing a lot of these challenges. Some states might be experiencing them even to a greater degree. And so understanding the lessons learned from those other states and potentially what we could bring into North Carolina as we develop these alternative models to calculate the subsidy rate. Another important piece of the study is looking at other subsidy models that operate within North Carolina. So things like SNAP, housing, utility, these are social supports. And as Christy said, really, we need to have more public support for childcare. There's already public support for some of these other key pieces that are essential for a person to participate in the workforce. So what lessons can we learn from them? How are they defining a market? How do they calculate the rate? And so really looking for lessons across those markets to see, again, what we can learn to inform the development of these alternative models. So in the end of the study, what we hope to produce are 3 alternative models that the state can use to inform decisions. We know that any of these models are going to have to go through a lot of eyes are going to be looking at these models to decide what the best route forward is. And what we hope to bring to this study, and I think our unique perspective, is to make the business case as to why these models are needed, why these alternative models are needed, and just kind of highlighting the pros and cons of each of them. And again, that will be a key deliverable for the end of this study. And so we've all talked about the importance of childcare, not only for the child, but for the parent and the family so that they can get to work, for the providers so that they can have a living wage as business owners. So we know that this impacts people at this micro level. And something that we want to do with this study is really make that business case across the state. So to help legislators understand when you fund childcare, this is what you could potentially see in the economy. And when you don't fund childcare at an adequate level, this is what could potentially happen in the economy. So really trying to draw that line and make it clear as to why this is important. Because again, we know this at a micro level. Like we see a family struggling, we see children who have not gone to childcare and how they arrive at kindergarten, maybe without the skills they need to be successful. We see parents drop out of the workforce so that they can take care of their families. But when we can quantify it, monetize and quantify that for the state, our hope is that really helps hit our message that a better model is needed. So thank you all so much for having me.
Thank you, Amanda. And sounds excellent what you're trying to quantify for folks. And I think it'll help us in the breakout sessions and even the next question to delve a little bit more deeply into what you're trying to do. Lisa, I'm going to ask you to provide us some final thoughts on the matter, on this question about what we're seeing during COVID, post-COVID, in the current economy. And I'll just take this opportunity as well to tell folks, ask questions in the chat. We're about halfway through our little Q&A with our panelists here. I have another question for them here in just a moment, but then I want to hopefully have a few minutes to open it up to your pressing questions. So please, as they bring something up, you need clarification on something or another kind of question, throw it in the chat. Ben, I believe, is monitoring that, and I'm monitoring that, and we'll try and get to some here in about 20 minutes. So Lisa, some final thoughts on the question.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much. I also wanted to thank Linda for her continued commitment to trying to make this work and for all the challenges that providers meet every day. So I wanted to sort of take this out maybe a wider aperture about the economic impacts. During COVID, we did a survey of 800 parents in North Carolina with Zogby Survey Company, and also with an economist from the city of New York. And we asked parents not just about what was going on with their childcare challenges during COVID, but we asked them about pre-COVID, what those challenges were, and also a little bit about what their preferences are for the type of care they could have, you know, if they could have exactly what they wanted. And what we found was that pre-pandemic, our state was losing $2.4 billion because of this inadequate care. And if we break that down, it's $1.5 billion in parents' income across the state. These are with children 0 to age 5. For our business revenue, it was about $500 million. And also for our state tax revenue, we're losing about $400 million in state tax revenue. So if we just look at it from a dollars and cents perspective, you know, we're not doing a very good job. We also looking at sort of the state of families in North Carolina, and only 3.4% of our families have a caregiver who is at home taking care of a child or children. And so if we look at that, it's just incredibly clear that the way we approach work and family life and families' ability to be responsible for their children and their work, it's just out of touch with reality. You know, this isn't Leave It to Beaver anymore or any of those kinds of things. People have to work in our economy right now. The other thing, I was been looking at it from an economic development perspective, and I haven't had a minute to look at your counties here, and I apologize for that. But I did take a minute a few weeks ago, and I looked at the Guilford, the greater sort of Guilford area, and we see that between that Toyota plant that is coming to Randolph County and that, I want to call it the Sonic Boom, but it's Boom Sonic, isn't it? Yes, Boom Supersonic plant coming to Guilford County. That's about 3,700 jobs that are supposedly coming over the next several years to this region. And in that prosperity zone, over 50% of the children age 0 to 5 do not have a place to go for childcare. So we have a desert. And so is Toyota going to do something? Is the Sonic Boom plant going to do something? Or is our state going to really come in and say, hey, we're attracting businesses here, but what are the services that we also need to provide for them to be successful? So currently, these businesses have incentives if they're going to hire X number of employees, but maybe we should look a little differently about what incentives mean when we're attracting businesses. And especially in manufacturing, you know, we have a huge ambition in our state, and part of that definitely involves having people with a post-secondary education. So we have that goal. And how can we meet that goal when parents are making choices that are not in their best economic mobility situation over their lifetime because they're not finishing their education, they're quitting their job, they're not taking the promotion that may involve more responsibilities, and they're just making choices that we call it the double bind. You know, you can't work because you don't have care, you don't have care because you don't work. And so we're putting people in these economic situations that are not good for their family. So I'm gonna stop there, but I just wanted to put it in the dollars and cents perspective.
Thank you, Lisa. That's really valuable information from the foundation as well. So really, again, we've gone about a half an hour into our 1 hour session. Luckily, I only have 2 questions for this panel. So our timing's pretty good. So really what I want to do now is get into what might be done to fix some of these issues. Again, this is a sort of a multiple question discussion, all related to employers and the role in helping to solve the challenges. Lisa, you just alluded to it, you know, what might Toyota or Boom Sonic or others do? What could others do that exist within the region? I know that local governments and government sectors a large employer here. Obviously, we've got some pharmaceuticals who are large employers. The healthcare system is large employers. So yeah, how do we, discussion about how these employers and their role in helping to solve the challenges. And panelists, please feel free to approach these three sort of questions in whatever way you feel appropriate. One, what strategies and policy changes might better support, attract and retain employees with young children now and build the workforce of the future? A second angle or way to put it is, how can businesses incorporate childcare related expenses as a component of an employee's benefits package? And the other thing we were thinking about, or I was thinking about, is how can childcare availability and quality be incorporated into the recruitment package for new employees? And Lisa, we finished up with you, so I'll just kind of go back to you. You touched on it a little bit, but I believe you might have a case study on the topic that sets a great example. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. I also just want to say at the outset that we need these public and private partnerships, but we need a real robust public policy that will allow care to be available to all families. And so we just finished this case study. It'll be published in the next few days. I was in Cabarrus County a few months ago, and I met someone whose job it is for the county to be the early childhood manager. And I said, Carla, what do you actually do? And she told us that her county made a commitment to address the childcare needs of their county employees. And so I just wrote this case study, so I got to look back at my notes a little bit. So in March of 2020, they decided to take some of their care, the CARES money from the federal government and work with a local congregation to build out a childcare facility that has just opened and is a 5-star childcare facility. And the county, I believe that there's more than 50 slots at the facility, but a certain number of them, I think it's 40, are dedicated to the county employees. And there is now a recurring budget for the county to pay 50% of the fees for these county employees. And we've interviewed some of the employees, and the case study, I think, is pretty awesome to just show what it means for a county employee who is not, making a huge salary, what kind of difference this can make to them. And so, it's a drop in the bucket when we look at all the issues facing our state around childcare, but I think it's an example of the we can't wait attitude that we need to have more of. So we can do a lot of these things that are stopgap, but we need bigger public policy. And I just have to tell you that I'm putting in a plug because I know some of you are economic development folks. At the NC Works conference in a couple of weeks, I'm going to give a workshop on this whole topic on Thursday at 9 o'clock. And I hope that if you're going to that conference, you'll come and talk to me, and we'll learn a whole lot more about not just childcare policies that employers can support their employees, but also we'll look at a whole range of policies in the workplace that are really going to help parents. So things like paid leave and a more flexible schedule, some things that you might know about, but we'll do a whole lot more work on that.
Excellent. All right, good start. Alexandria, can you lend some insight from that federal and state level on the issue of strategies and policy changes to aid?
Sure, excited to share. And I think building on what I said earlier, we have evidence that these policies can really make a difference. And one of the things I think to what Lisa was talking about is it's going to take that will to build the public systems that we really need and the public investment that we really need. So what I would point to in terms of key policy levers that we have within the childcare system is the work that's underway right now to make sure that we're really adequately providing providers with the funds that allow them to pay living wages, provide benefits, make sure that they're delivering quality care, that market rate study and the work to really design that reflective of what the cost of care is really critical. We also know that, as you heard, the cost for families is very significant as a barrier. So I think one of the policy levers that that can be looked at is, the level of the parent copay requirement and the direct investment that we're making at the federal and state level to support more families receiving the assistance they need to afford care. Many of you have likely followed the federal conversations happening about what would it look like to really make a robust commitment to childcare. And those proposals, I think, are exciting and also will require us all to be thinking really hard about how do we get ready for the potential of a universal childcare access, which we know is the right thing to do given the research and the evidence about what young children need. But it is a work that will need to happen. I want to also just name a broader approach here that I think is really critical in the early childhood space, because ultimately what we're talking about is making sure that families have what they need. And tax credits for working families have historically provided a lot of direct support to households so that they have the income to make decisions and afford the priorities in their households. So things like the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit, which last year was expanded at the federal level, we saw had a significant impact on families' ability to afford household expenses, including childcare. And so I think when we think about the policy levers at our disposal, we shouldn't just look within the childcare system, but we need to be thinking about what does it look like to build a tax code that supports work, that supports children's healthy development. What does it look like to build our incentive policies to consider what is it that companies are looking for in communities? It is not just the incentive itself. It is the quality of life in that community. It is the access to childcare, K through 12 education. It's all of those things that make a place a priority for businesses to expand and grow in. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for us to get creative about how we connect the dots across these policy areas. And, to sort of your question, Ron, we can't just look at the local solutions. One of the things I think we face in looking at state policy or looking statewide is that we want every community to have the opportunity to provide families with these resources and with quality early childhood services. That won't happen if we just allow local governments to move forward alone. It's great when they can, but we know that some communities have resource limitations. The state has to step in these moments, has to make sure there are not growing inequities. And that's where I think, to Lisa's point, at base, we need a public commitment that is bold at the state level to say this is a priority economic development issue for our state.
Thank you. Yes, and I think sounds like there's a lot of factual data to support that conclusion. And so, hopefully we're moving in that direction. Karen, I wanted to ask you to share with us a bit about the alternative rate study and models and subsidies that you kind of know about and might want to tell folks about.
Amanda.
Yep.
Sorry, man.
That's
did I get
okay.
that wrong?
That's okay.
There is a Karen Manship working on this process too. So
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
No,
who
that's
probably
okay.
just had a heart attack. So
I in my notes, right? Amanda.
It's a great example of what we're talking about, though, because I had to be with my son at the doctor, and so Karen was able to attend the meeting to catch me up and get me ready for this. So yeah, and I think, like my colleagues were saying, that we can't rely on these local solutions. Or Ron, like you were saying, we can't rely on these Band-Aids for this gushing wound. Like one, not everybody has the Band-Aids. Not every community has these public-private partnerships where we can make something amazing happen. So we shouldn't focus on that as a key solution. It's great when it happens, but I love how Alexandra and Lisa were saying that we need better overall public policy. And so the work that AIR is doing with DCDEE is really aimed at informing those conversations to make a better overall policy. And like I mentioned earlier, we are, and Alexandra, this was like a perfect tee up, like talking about the other flexibilities or the other mechanisms that can be pulled. Like this doesn't all need to be the childcare, the subsidy, like that there can be other things that happen to try to address this issue, because it is complex. And so we need comprehensive solutions for that. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So in our study, we have already, and we're still in the early stages, but we've already started reviewing how other markets in North Carolina operate, and we're learning a lot of lessons, a lot of potential flexibilities that might be there. So I think, in the beginning of this conversation, we were talking about how, childcare was hit so hard by the COVID pandemic, but in a way that's an opportunity for us to think about, just rebuilding it. I think about my kids when they build something with Legos and someone wrecks it, and of course someone's feelings are hurt, but then they rebuild it and it's even better than ever. And so, taking this opportunity as a chance to look at lessons that we've learned from COVID, and really think about how we can rebuild a better ship for our childcare and for our families and our businesses and our business owners across the state. So just one example might be, looking at how other subsidy markets set or define their market. So what is a market? Is it a county? Is it a zip code? Is it a metropolitan area? Thinking about that as a flexibility, thinking about the subsidy rate. Something we're very passionate about at AIR, and I think this gets to that equity issue, is thinking about calculating the subsidy rate based on cost, like how much does it actually cost to provide this high level quality of care, as opposed to the price, as opposed to what families are able to pay. And we've heard examples here today of how families cannot always pay what it costs, but if we're charging too much, then we have no families to come use our services. And so it's really just this cycle that just keeps playing out, and we only get kids in this, you're only birth to 5 or birth to 8 for that many years. And so we don't get a lot of chances to make it right. And so it's really important that we're taking this moment, with this at the end of COVID, and using these funds to really think about strategically how we can develop alternative models, and thinking about how we can get high quality care to more families, including those who need after hours care or weekend care, overnight care. When we think about the businesses that were hit so hard by the pandemic, they might not be working that typical 9 to 5 where they can drop up in the morning and pick up in the evening. Or when we think about the Department of Corrections or healthcare workers, or even people working at these manufacturing places that Lisa brought up, those are probably not going to be 9 to 5 jobs. And so thinking about how we can provide care for those families who need childcare outside of these more traditional times. And so that's what our work really hopes to do. And we're very excited to be learning from you all and engaging you all in this work.
Thank you, Amanda. Sorry about that on the Karen thing.
Okay.
Linda, for those of you watching the chat, had to drop off. She's had something come up, an emergency, and has to drop the call. So I'm going to exercise my right as the pivoting moderator of this panel to just say, have we got a frontline childcare provider on the phone that really had anything they might want to add, just a short 30 or 60-second comment about, what strategies or policies that they've seen or might have experienced in their daycare center, or ideas they've come up with that they think might work, especially that how businesses might incorporate childcare into their model, or how childcare availability and quality can be incorporated into recruitment of businesses, or how important it is to that. And it's just sort of an open floor question for somebody to unmute. It's like pop quiz time. I don't really expect anybody to pick up the ball, but I wanted to put it out there.
I think maybe I could help them get started because I know what Linda probably would say. And it's rates, and it goes back to true costs, and that they can't keep going without being able to be reimbursed for the true cost of care because they can't afford to pay people what they need. So they're caught between a rock and a hard place. They're not getting the people they need because they're not paying them enough, and they can't pay more because the state is paying so low and also just for the people who are subsidized. That she talked to me when I asked her to be on the panel about the parents who make too much to even be eligible for subsidy, that we cut off subsidy eligibility at 85% of the state median income. And lots of parents make, right at, there's a lot of people who can't afford care, and we don't do anything for them. And so the childcare providers are put in a place where they have to almost, they're fronting costs, they're carrying costs of people who owe them parent fees, and the state charges a parent fee, even for the people who are subsidy eligible. And she talked to me about that a lot of the parents just can't pay that, because you can be on subsidy and have a $275 parent copay that the state paid with ARPA funds until the end of last fiscal year, June 30th. But then people all of a sudden had to go back to paying their parent fee, and the price of gas had gone up, the price of housing had gone up, the price of food certainly has gone up, and people just didn't have it. And so they didn't pay their childcare provider. They had to choose between paying rent and paying their childcare provider. So they're carrying a lot of those costs. So that's another one of those pieces that even in our current system doesn't really work well in our current environment. So
Okay.
come on, there's a bunch of you guys on the call. I know you think things. It's a leadership opportunity.
Okay, well, what I'll do is I'll transition over. We're going to do breakouts here pretty soon. Again, we've got about 10 minutes left in this Q&A thing, so please ask questions if you've got them. And from here, I'll just go to Christy and say, can you go ahead and share your expertise to wrap up this final topic before we start heading into those breakout groups?
Sure. Thank you so much. I mean, everything that everyone has already said, I would 100% say ditto. But I want to just sort of bring it home if I can. When COVID-19 pandemic hit, the Division of Child Development's priorities during the crisis were to protect children, to protect families, protect providers, and keep North Carolina working. And we did that by making investments with the federal dollars that we had in health and safety. But we also had to invest in operational support and in our workforce, our early childhood workforce. And then for families, we wanted to make sure that we addressed access and affordability. Those things still need to happen. And as our priorities during the crisis were to protect, now we shift to build beyond surviving to moving the system forward towards sustainability. Our commitment from the state is we've got to continue to invest in our early childhood and learning providers. We've got to invest in compensation and benefits for teachers and staff. And we have to make availability and accessibility for our families. Because what we know is that our families have to work. We know this. North Carolina has a high quality early care and learning network that is proven to produce better education, health, and economic outcomes for children and for the state. The availability of this high quality early care and learning is a major factor in attracting businesses from around the world to bring jobs to North Carolina. It is the support mechanism that families have to work, and it builds the next generation of workers by laying a foundation for long-term success. So we have to have more investment. We have to continue to think outside the box. And that is why you're hearing about these projects that the division is supporting. As Henrietta stated, and as Amanda has stated, we want an alternative rate methodology for childcare subsidies that pays the full cost of care so that providers get the full cost of care and they're able to then pay their staff. We also need to address the administration cost of these programs. We're paying 4% to run subsidy in North Carolina. The state legislature gives us 4%. They give us 4% to run our NC pre-K programs. Until this last legislative session, we had not had an increase in the rates since 2011 in our NC pre-K programs. We have to do that. We have to have public investment in these programs because parents cannot build, we cannot build this on the backs of parents. Right now in North Carolina, there is a severe teacher shortage in this field of early care and learning. It's hard work. They don't get paid enough. The challenges are unreasonable. So what we are looking at is how do we find ways to get people into the field, attract them into the field, keep them in the field. We've got to have policy levers that allow us to continue to compensate those folks in a way that will keep them and retain them. And we've got to provide access to higher education so that they can get the credentials that they need and the education that they need to continue to have a high quality workforce. We need to do things like provide full funding for wages, which is a salary supplement program across the state. You've already heard about the parent copays. While that is a requirement to receive federal money, our state legislature has in legislation in state law that it has to be 10%. That can be changed. We can reduce that economic burden on parents by reducing that copay amount. We've got to have investment from our businesses. If they need employees, and in order for employees to work and to provide the type of quality work that they need, they have to have care for their young children. So we have to find ways to put all of these together and to continue to work together and to do things in new and innovative ways. We are also at the division launching a campaign that really is a public education campaign about the value of our state's early care and learning network. This campaign, our hope is that it is going to show how greater support and investments deliver more positive outcomes for children, families, and North Carolina's economy. And we have to have public investment in early education because that helps us all raise NC. So this public awareness campaign is called Raise NC. We've got to make people aware of that. We've got all kinds of folks coming to us. We've got the Department of Corrections, which has already been mentioning, that cannot find childcare for their workforce. And we have to find a way to address that. We've got the military coming to us saying they can't find childcare for their workforce either. And if our military and our defenses are not able to be in place, what are we going to do? Luckily, we have fared well in North Carolina. you've heard all these negative statistics. We actually fared better than most states. In North Carolina, we lost about 2.7% of our early care and learning programs across the state compared to, our workforce, our early care and learning workforce. We lost about 2.7%. That compared to a nationwide, we've seen as high as 16% in some areas. But right now is when the impact is truly being felt, Ron. What we're seeing is people are now, because the public funding is going away, there's this funding cliff looming. I don't think we've seen the worst of what's going to hit at this point. I think we were very strategic in what we did early on in the pandemic. We used our funding appropriately, but even when Build Back Better was being talked about at the federal level, North Carolina's legislature had already said, we're not going to take that federal dollars because there was a state match that had to be there. And that's just too much. We have got to convince our state legislators that this is a priority. Early care and learning is a priority. It is the backbone of our state's economy, and we have to push these policy levers, and we have to invest in early education because that's what it's going to take to raise North Carolina.
Wow, what a morning. Yeah, so a lot to think about as we here at exactly 11:09 on my computer. So we're going to be launching here in just a minute into the breakout sessions for 15 minutes. We're going to make, I think, based on the number of people, wow, we've got
3, Ron. Yeah, 3.
How much?
3 breakout rooms, and there is some time built in for Q&A now, of course. So if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask, we can. If not, of course, we can move straight into the 3 breakout rooms.
Great.
Henrietta, I saw the question about workforce initiatives. Would you like me to elaborate a little bit more on that?
That would be great, Christy, because I think that is a solution that we've got to be working, and some of the people on this call right now are working towards that. If you can take a minute.
Yeah, so early on when the pandemic hit, what some folks' immediate response in the state is that we needed to lower standards. And so we immediately said that cannot happen. We cannot lower the standards of our workforce when we're dealing with children in their most formative years. And so what we at the division did is we began working with our university and community college partners to think of a way of how we could help with this. And so what we've done is we've really thought about how to address access, affordability for our childcare workforce to go back to school and to get education. And because there's been this turnover in our workforce, we have new people coming in that need to get the education. And so in order to do that, we've done some amazing things. One, we have worked with the apprenticeship program through the Department of Labor and the governor's office. And we are working from high school to start building a pipeline of new teachers to come into the workforce. We know we've lost some. We know we're not back to where we were pre-pandemic, and we've got people that can't find teachers across the state. The workforce shortage. We have children on waiting lists that cannot be served and parents that cannot go back to work because we don't have teachers in classrooms. And so what we're trying to do is to find a way to address that. So apprenticeships is one solution. We're working with Henrietta and her team on getting a pilot program started in your region around apprenticeships. And what that does is if they start in high school, they can get the qualifying courses free while they're in high school. And they can then start working in childcare, and we have dollars to help providers pay those interns that are working, those apprentices that are working, so they can work and get the tutelage under someone who's well and experienced and really learn the field. At the same time, it helps providers to have these apprentices because it increases their staff-child ratio, but also they get funding to help support the cost of paying their salary. So that's one example. Not only are we doing it from high school, but we're also doing apprenticeships for people that are already in the program. And we're pairing it with support services of our Teach scholarship, which will cover all their education costs, all their tuition costs, all the books. It'll even give them bonuses after they finish and continue their education. So that's one thing. Another thing that we've done, though, that I think is very innovative is we've worked with our community college to say, hey, what else can we do? There is one course, it's the EDU 119, which is an early childhood credential that's required to work in childcare. We are developing a test out option so that people can get it much quicker. That is going to be administered through the division, and it's going to be free of charge. There's not going to be any charge for providers to, if they hire someone that they need as a lead teacher and they do not have any education in the field, they can go and get this beginning part by taking a test. Or that if they've worked with children in another type of environment, they have the experience, it's a way to get them in the door. So that's another thing. But some of the coolest things that we're doing is we've worked at our community college to build a workforce certificate, which is 18 credit hours, which is a stackable credential that builds toward an associate degree, which is where we want people to go. It is 6 classes. We've worked with our community college to look at credit for prior learning, and they're going to be able to get up to 9 of those credits for prior learning and experience that they've had. And so what happens is they have to prove that they have the competencies through a portfolio assessment, and they will get credit if they follow this process. All of those details are being worked out. We're going to be pushing that out very soon, but it's a way for people that have been in the field or new people coming in to get credit for work experience and for prior learning. In addition to that, we're adding alternative pathways for how long it takes. Typically, when you go to college, it takes a whole semester to finish a course. We're doing things in very abbreviated timeframes. We're wrapping those teach supports around so that they don't have to pay for it. And things of that nature as well. We're also giving credit. There's a requirement of health and safety trainings that are needed when you start working in childcare. If you take those health and safety trainings, they're going to be applicable and going to transfer over to college credit. So that's another step. And then one other thing that we're doing, CDA, which is a national credential, and it impacts especially our NC pre-K program. Our teacher assistants have to have a CDA. We are providing that training free, and we're covering the cost of the assessment to get people there, and they can do it in a very abbreviated time frame. So these are just a couple of the types of examples that we're doing to really increase that accessibility and affordability so that so we can address this workforce crisis and get people into the centers.
Wow. Right. I imagine people are scribbling some furious notes here. I certainly hope so. Excellent information. It sounds like, at least to me, hitting it from every side, every creative avenue you can think of. And I think that's a great segue into the breakout sessions. We're going to have 3 rooms. You have been assigned. So the way this works, if you haven't done it in Zoom before, is you'll be prompted to go into a breakout room. You'll be there for about 15 minutes. The questions that we have are twofold. There'll be a moderator in your breakout room. I will be one of them. I think Michael will be another one. Ben, who is the third? Are you the...
It's pretty well spread out between the speakers. That would make the most sense for the panelists to be the moderators, but I'll also put you in a room, Ron.
Okay, great. Well, they know their assignments. The breakout questions are: how do the issues presented so far impact you and your network? So not just thinking about yourself and your role in the childcare system and whatever job you may be in, but also the people around you in that bigger picture. And then what strategies or solutions are most resonating with you? What of all the information you've heard today, really says, that one's a gem, right? So we're going to do a little gem mining here in this breakout session. Or if you have a gem yourself, bring it up in the room. It's a limited amount of time. It's going to be a fairly large breakout room. I'm going to ask that people try and keep their thoughts succinct and on point, and that the moderators will come back in and we will report out from these breakout rooms. With room 1, who is reporting out for room number 1?
So room 1 was the room with Amanda and Lisa, among others, and Michael Williams.
Okay.
Michael, do you want to be the reporter? You were such a great facilitator. I
Well,
nominate you.
I'll be happy to let you do that, Amanda, if you like.
Oh, sure. Sure. You probably saw me taking a bajillion notes because I'm learning so much from this. Again, I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this. So when we talked about how issues that we've heard about in the beginning of our session impact the network of the individuals in our breakout room, we heard some interesting strategies that families have started using and that centers or childcare facilities have started using. One of those is really relying on the support system, like it really takes a village, that kind of thing. Bartering for childcare, saying, I'll watch them at this, I'll watch all of the kids at this time, and then you take them all at that time. Just trying to, again, like plug the holes of these childcare gaps. And then all of those things, Sonia was telling us, they're still applying for subsidies and getting that stuff going all at the same time. So it's not like we stop at the bartering. It's, it's just kind of like a stopgap while we continue working on more long-term solutions. Something else that was raised was just how hard it is for parents to take a job that starts immediately. So you apply for a job and you get called for an interview and you're so excited because you need the job. And then they say, can you start Monday? But if you have children and you can't find a childcare spot, oftentimes you have to decline that job. And then that just perpetuates this cycle of, not being able to work because you need childcare, and not being able to afford childcare because you can't find a job. So I think that example there really hit home. We also heard from someone in our group who talked about a family survey that they did to learn a little bit more about the transition from childcare into kindergarten, or no childcare and into kindergarten. And this person reported out that overwhelmingly year after year, everyone says that they wish they had more high quality pre-K options, more education for kids before they get to kindergarten. And so, it's not just the research or the teachers seeing that, but also the families and parents are feeling and seeing that as well. A lack of benefits was presented as an issue. Facilities aren't able to offer benefits because they can't afford it. One suggestion was to have childcare providers looped into the teacher benefit system, since it's already established and they are also in fact teachers. We heard an example about Nash Hospital, who was trying to work to secure childcare for their staff, but they're running into wait lists where they are. And so that was another issue. Let's see, I think we talked about better pathways for perhaps a paid apprenticeship. I know, Christy, you were sharing all those great programs. I wish I couldn't write fast enough to get all that down. They all sounded great, but being sure that you're looping them in and incentivizing them to stay, so that it's not just something they do and then leave, but that it's a position that they want to hold. And we talked a lot about the copay, that 10%. And it sounded like our group, and please step in if I'm misquoting this, it sounded like our group agreed that it's important that parents are contributing something, but that 10% in some cases is too much. I thought it was a great example that Sonia brought up, thinking about a person who is just getting a job after being unemployed for a while. They might need every penny of that income to handle debts that they have, or get gas, or figure out this new routine of getting to work every day and buying clothes for everyone so that they can go everywhere that they need to be. And so perhaps a tiered system, that was something that was brought up as an idea to, maybe someone starts out at 1 or 3% and then slowly that goes up to 10%. And, just understanding that 10% might sound small, but for some families that ends up being a significant hit for them and what their everything that they're trying to manage. So Michael, I think I captured everything, but I'm looking to you to see if I missed anything.
Did an awesome job, man.
Great, thanks.
All right, excellent, excellent. And
Yeah, Ron, do you want to jump to room 3? That was the one with Christy and Heather. And then of course,
Sure.
yeah.
sure. Go ahead, room 3, Christy, Heather, or whoever's reporting out.
I will. I took the notes. I'm Cheryl Yarrow. I was in that group as well. But the first question, we heard a lot of the things that we said has been repeated already. The village mentality, everyone needs to be on the same page with the topic. We also talked about that the coronavirus is still out there and providers cannot afford to pay sick leave for their workers. Ditto to that with lack of child care benefits. Some of the strategies and solutions. We also talked about apprenticeship programs for early childhood majors to make the field intriguing and encourage them to stay in it and work in it. Incentivizing businesses to help support childcare. We discussed that raising the eligibility requirements for benefits often hurts families because they do not qualify anymore. But if we're going to raise eligibility, we also need to raise funding from private sector as well as governmental sector. One thing that was very interesting that showed up was that during this period where there was funding, some childcare workers declined one-time bonuses because they were afraid that that short-term lump sum of money would show up in their paychecks and hurt their eligibility for other benefits that they were receiving. So, and we also discussed that may be the person who's doing the eligibility for that parent, that they were not looking at that correctly. But, you know, we discussed that and how that was kind of a challenging thing for childcare workers when they needed that
Great, great. From there, I'm going to go ahead and segue. Henrietta, you took notes for group number 2. Do you want to go ahead and build on what's been said by 1 and 3?
I will. Well, we started off with Mary Marlin, the aging director for the COG, really talking about the parallel issues in elder care. And I think that's an important thing to understand, that the issues of not having enough caregivers, not having them paid enough to be a stable workforce, having a growing, elder care, elderly population. She talked about having more people over 60 than under 17. And I think that from a public policy, point of view, making sure that we have the people we need to take care of all of the people, children, not only cradle to career, but, the elder population as well. So I think that also goes to electing policymakers who are going to support, the largely working women workforce with not only living wages, but wages that let them provide quality care and have benefits. So I think that those are important. That's an important connection to make in terms of electing policymakers that are going to have an integrated solution so that we have a community that people want to move to. And as an employer, I will say the folks taking care of their kids and the folks taking care of their parents who are having problems, those productivity issues and the things that have people leaving and calling out are there's the same impact on the employers. So and I also heard and wrote down one of the issues that in terms of remote working, that many people are remotely working, and you are dealing with both childcare issues and elder care issues simultaneously. And from an employer perspective, it's it's difficult to say, no, you can't leave to take care of your child or your 90-year-old mother, and the bandwidth that is shrinking for all of us who are trying to balance those things. Where we had a good comment about what kind of very concrete things like health insurance for caregivers and looping them into the state system, for teachers, or property tax breaks. What are some of the other very concrete supports that would allow people to have more money in their centers and their homes to pay and attract and retain high quality workforce that people need. We had one of the providers talk about the people having to take second jobs so they couldn't go back to school. So things just kept coming back to, we're not paying people enough to be able to professionalize and be a stable workforce. And one of the I think most important questions, or not questions, things that I heard was the need for after school care. And I wrote down in my notes, once kids go to school, it's 6.5 hours a day, 10 months a year, maybe, if there's not a pandemic or a flood or a hurricane that, but the workday is 8 hours, and you gotta, have the commute time on both sides. And so there is literally almost no support for stable after school care. And that is really maybe one of the things that I think a lot of employers, is very visible to people. People have to leave and go get their kids and get them settled somewhere, and then they come back. And so I think that's an important thing not to forget and drop off the list, and maybe something that's lower cost because it's less hours, but and that's an important piece, that going back to what does the state pay and who's eligible, that may be something that we could look at in the market rate study. And I think those are the big things that I heard.
All right. Well, I'll be honest with you, folks, I'm a little overwhelmed by the entire topic. But what I will say, in sort of wrapping up and talking about final thoughts and next steps, is that we've got a lot of people in the room. It is a large network of people when you think about everyone you're dealing with it both professionally and personally. I know in our little breakout room, 2 people shared about getting stuck between taking care of a grandchild and taking care of a parent with health issues and that sort of thing, and the struggles there. It's about education. It's about leaning in. One of the things I thought about, and I'm certainly not very good at this, is social media and the networking and getting the word out. It almost seems like this should be a viral topic somewhere on LinkedIn or Facebook or TikTok or whatever. I don't know. But, everybody sort of standing up and saying, how do we solve this? And letting decision makers and leaders kind of get overwhelmed by how complex the issue is, because that's what forces time and resources to be put on the table. And employers to act as well. I am glad North Carolina is a competitive state and ahead of many, if not most, on what they're dealing with. Nonetheless, there's way more to be done and needing to be done soon. What we're going to do, the panelists and Henrietta and others that were prepping for this meeting, is we're going to commit to following up with a survey with you all that'll get constructed. It hasn't begun, but we've got participants on this call. We really want to get your feedback on what you found valuable today. This was sort of a gathering, if you will, to kind of broach the issue, hear each other, discuss the primary issues, and try and figure out where do we go from here. So that survey will be coming. I also wanted to clarify one of the reasons why Upper Coastal Plain Council of Governments is at the table today is that we are, as a regional organization representing the 5 counties and the municipalities and not just those local governments, but all the allies, public and private in that space, have a comprehensive economic development strategy for the region. That strategy was mentioned earlier. It is getting rewritten. It gets rewritten in full, sort of rethought every 5 years. That is happening. It's in its final stages. Childcare is on that radar. That comprehensive economic development strategy, we try to cast a wide umbrella. We think about community development issues. We think about infrastructure issues. We think about poverty and equity and those kinds of things that sometimes traditional economic development or old school economic development models don't really take into account. So we're thinking about food and food supply and stuff like that. So we're trying to pay attention is my point. That's why Michael Williams is on the call with Turning Point Workforce Development. That's why Mary Marlin is on the call with the Area Agency on Aging. Why Ben is on the call as Director of Planning and Development Services here in the region. So do know that the Upper Coastal Plain Council of Governments is trying to tune in and figure out how we may be of some assistance, and that our board is made up of those county commissioners and municipal mayors and economic developers and others around the region. And feel free to reach out to us in the future as we go forward. Those are my final plugs for today. I hope this has been helpful for folks. I'm going to let you go a few minutes early.
Before we dismiss, though, I want to make sure Henrietta Zalkind doesn't have any other final thoughts from DEPC.
Now, I just want to thank the COG for facilitating this and raising up this issue you wanted to peel the onion. I think you saw how many layers there are. I think we've made really good progress just uncovering some of those next steps. And I think really reaching out and participating in these listening sessions that the ARIS group is going to do, and that the partnership is also going to do some listening sessions with parents and businesses across the state. And we would invite, both the COG and the ARIS folks to do that. Because I think the data tells a story, but we also need to talk to parents, and then we need to have parents and businesses talk to their policymakers, and we have to elect policymakers who understand these issues and are going to, at every level, at the local level, at the state level, and the federal level, invest the kind of resources we need to have both the workforce of today able to be wholly present, and the workforce of tomorrow ready to, have thriving economies in all of our communities. And so we've got to be raising these issues with the people who are running for office, and vote for policymakers who are going to invest in equity for all and every community. And November 8th will be here before you know it, and early voting starts on October 20th. So vote, vote for people who are going to invest in kids and families and, and workplaces that are thriving and, help our community thrive. So thank everybody for participating.
Thank you, Henrietta. We'll be sharing the recording out, and your input really does help us understand and helps that comprehensive economic development strategy carry forward with our allies. And again, please feel free to reach out. We look forward to continuing the discussion in some way soon.
All right, y'all stay safe.
Yes.
See you.
Best of luck with the weather.
Yes, best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you all.